Welcome, my dear friend. In jail, different people are brought together, each one with different crimes and sentences. When pedophiles are discovered, they have chance to stand up. Today we have 10 child molesters instantly murdered in jail. Next week we're going to do following video about this topic with 10 more child molesters, so stay tuned. At Mule Creek State Prison, 46-year-old DeAndre Austin was serving life in prison for serial rape, sodomy, and sexual abuse of underage children when his life was cut short by another man in his cell. On the 14th of October, 2020, he had lived with his nieces in Richmond for about 4 years when it was discovered that he had repeatedly assaulted the 3 young girls. Officials at the prison moved quickly to respond to a man-down alarm that was raised at the prison. On a fateful evening, they discovered Austin in his cell unresponsive. An hour later, his cellmate Rodney Jordan was suspected of having attacked and killed him. Unclear what Rodney's motive for the murder was, but reports indicate that it was most likely due to Austin's record as a child molester. Rodney was immediately placed in segregated housing and refused contact with other inmates or visitors until the conclusion of the investigation. 41-year-old Jonathan Watson claimed that he did everyone a favor when he attacked and killed David Bob and Graham DeLuise Conti. The two victims were serving life sentences for the aggravated sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl, and they had the misfortune of having other inmates aware of that. But the straw that broke the camel's back seemed to be David Bob's decision to watch a TV program, PBS Kids, in a shared prison space where other inmates were. Watson recalled that the other inmates were upset, and one of them asked if they were really going to sit there and watch him viewing kids on a show. When he was in jail from nesting one, then he got up and told them he would handle it, and to him that was grabbing a walking cane and beating Bob repeatedly until he was almost as good as dead. But he didn't stop there. Watson had no intention of concealing his crime, so he went to look for a prison warden to report himself. When he saw Graham DeLuise Conti, who had also been convicted with Bob for the same crime, so he decided that he'd take him out too. He used the same weapon to hit him repeatedly when he went to turn himself into prison. Officials, the fatally injured inmates were rushed to the hospital. David Bob died en route while his partner died at the hospital 3 days later. Watson believed that he had nothing to lose since he was serving a life sentence. John Keoghan was a defrocked Catholic priest who was at the center of a sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. He was born on June 4, 1935 in Boston, Massachusetts, and was ordained as a priest in 1962. Keoghan served in several parishes throughout Massachusetts until his removal from active ministry in 1993 after allegations of sexual abuse of minors came to light. An investigative team, through their reporting in 2002, revealed that church officials, including Cardinal Bernard Law, had allowed Keoghan to continue serving in parishes. Despite multiple reports of sexual abuse, Keoghan was eventually convicted of sexually abusing a child and sentenced to prison while Keoghan was serving his sentence in prison in 2003. He was attacked and killed by another inmate, Joseph Drews, on the 26th of August. Drews said that from the moment he discovered who his fellow inmate was, he began to look at him as a prize, and then spent a whole month planning how he would kill him. Drew's background had been brought into question in finding a motive for his actions. He was said to be a member of a neo-Nazi hate group known as the Aryan Nation, and was serving a life sentence for killing a gay man who gave him a lift in 1988. Richard Huckle. You've most likely heard about the dark web, but this guy got it on a new level. The many atrocities that go on there, that's where Richard Huckle built a fan base by sharing gory images and recordings of his violent sexual acts with children. This pedophile site showed the abuse of babies and young children with tens of thousands of accounts, but they were not as hidden as they assumed. Police in Europe and Australia were aware of their activities and began to find ways to track them down. One after the other. First, they took out the creator of the site and then assumed his identity. This led to the arrest of Huckle, who stood out because he had access to so many children and was repeatedly posting such violent content. The British authorities were given a tip-off on his way to the UK for the Christmas holidays. Officers from the National Crime Agency's Child Exploitation and Online Protection Command arrested him at Gatwick Airport. His computer and hard drives had more than enough evidence of his evil deeds. In 2016, Huckle was found guilty of 71 offenses against 22 children. Many offenses were committed in Malaysia, where Huckle had been living for several years. He had posed as a Christian teacher and photographer to gain access to vulnerable children, and he shared images and videos of his abuse on the dark web. Huckle's crimes were so horrific that he was given 22 life sentences. But the 33-year-old was found dead in his prison cell in October of 2019. He had been subjected to over an hour of torture and abuse by a fellow inmate. Paul Fitzgerald. He walked into his cell, tied him up, and began to rape him repeatedly, assaulting him with all kinds of weapons, and then strangling him with an electrical cord. In the end, he pushed a big knife in Richard's anus. Theodore Dyer. In April 2012, a mother had just moved into a Grand Haven apartment, and their neighbor was a 65-year-old man named Theodore Dyer. They were friendly with one another, and her children would occasionally go to spend some time in his house. The woman, whose identity has been kept secret, didn't suspect any foul play since Dyer and his girlfriend didn't have any children, and it appeared that they had decided to shower some of their attention on her own kids. But one day she walked into the apartment and saw something that left her totally devastated. It was June 2013, and her 9-year-old daughter was still at Dyer's apartment, and it was already late, so she went over to call her daughter home. Her instinct stopped her from knocking, so she went inside and walked around the house searching for her neighbor and daughter. She peeked into Dyer's room and saw him sexually assaulting her daughter. In no time, she grabbed her daughter and ran outside. When she got in her apartment, where she called 911, Theodore was arrested and sentenced to 50 years in jail for first-degree criminal sexual conduct. He had only served 10 months when he was found dead. His soulmate Stephen Sanderson, who confessed to killing him because he was a child molester in court, Sanderson said that he found out about his cellmate's offense and got angry when he continued to justify his actions, then proceeded to kill him. Sanderson was serving a life sentence. David or C.S. Ramirez. After molesting an 11-year-old girl who confided in her mother, David Osius Ramirez was arrested, charged to court, and convicted of sexual assault charges against a minor. He was given a life sentence in 2013 and was being remanded at Duval County Jail in Jacksonville, Florida, when he was murdered in August of 2019. Police revealed that it was a revenge killing, most likely linked to his record as a child sex offender. His murderer was Paul Dixon, who was serving time in prison for murder. He was 46 years old at the time of the event and was said to have been in custody since he was 17. The two men were being kept on the topmost floor of the prison facility, which was dedicated to the most violent offenders prison. Officials revealed that another inmate who witnessed the murder firsthand refused to give any information, perhaps for fear of being tagged as a snitch and actor, which is also largely frowned upon by prisoners. It was, however, gathered that Ramirez and Dixon got into an argument that escalated into a physical fight. Dixon succeeded in overpowering Ramirez and stuck his head in a toilet bowl until he drowned. At first, Ramirez's death was not openly confirmed. A jail record showed that he had been discharged from jail, with the reason being specified as death following the event. Dixon refused to speak to the police or prison officials about it. 28-year-old Leonard Nelson was serving a 4-year sentence for aggravated burglary and sexual exploitation of a minor. Investigations revealed that he had videos showing two minors imitating some sexual acts, and his voice was heard in the background telling the children what to do. While some of his family members, including his aunt, tried to make a plea for him, saying he had autism and had the mind of an 8-year-old child, he was found guilty and charged to court. However, in June 2016, he was found dead in his cell. At first, prison officials did not suspect it was a homicide and assumed that he had killed himself. But injuries on his head and neck lead them to believe there was more to it. When his cellmate Daniel Smith was questioned, they discovered that he had murdered Nelson. Smith was serving a 5-year sentence for aggravated burglary and theft of property and will likely spend more time in jail for the murder. It was not revealed what weapons were used in the killing of Nelson or how he did it, but reports indicated they got into a scuffle after an argument. By the time it was discovered Nelson was dead. 23-year-old Mitchell Harrison was serving a sentence at a prison in County Durham, UK, when he was disemboweled and had his throat slit by two fellow inmates, Nathan Mann and Michael Parr Harrison. It was said to have begun to display sexually violent tendencies from a very young age, despite the fact that there were no known causes for these tendencies. His family was stable, but at 13 years old, he assaulted a 7-year-old girl and was given a formal warning by authorities. Yet at 15, he was charged to court for threatening to rape a 15-year-old classmate. By 2009, at 23, he was placed behind bars for raping a 13-year-old girl. He had met her on the street and lured her into his apartment, with the pretense that she was about to get money to get alcohol from him. When they were both in the apartment, he made her strip naked and raped her twice until she managed to escape and run into the street naked, holding her clothing. On the 1st of October, 2011, Mann and Parr had cooked up a sinister plan for Harrison. They invited him to a cell where they tied him up, slit his throat, stabbed his eyes, and slit his little body part open. They claimed that he had been bragging about how he sexually assaulted his 13-year-old victim and had decided to carry out their gory fantasies on him. In October 2022, Villanueva was sentenced to life in prison for the aggravated sexual assault of a child under the age of 14, but he was found unresponsive in his cell on a Friday morning in February of 2023. He was attacked and killed by his cellmate Ramon Escobar, who was also serving a life sentence at North Kern State Prison without the possibility of parole. After pleading guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in 2018, he had viciously killed 5 people, including his aunt and uncle, during a 1-month murder spree before the police apprehended him. Investigations revealed that he had killed his relatives before fleeing Texas and then began attacking people in Los Angeles and Santa Monica. As a homeless man, Villanueva was discovered by prison officials carrying out routine checks. They immediately called an ambulance and began attempting to resuscitate him, but he didn't make it out alive. It is reported that Escobar was known to bludgeon his victims with heavy weapons while they were sleeping. It is unclear how he killed Villanueva. Christian Mayer was a computer expert, father of 2, and the ringleader of an active online child exploitation group between 2012 and 2017. Mayer was born on November 2, 1976 in Toledo, Ohio, and had a computer science degree. Mayer and his co-conspirators used online chat rooms to groom and exploit teenage girls, persuading them to send sexually explicit images and videos of themselves. The group used sophisticated techniques to gain their trust of their victims, including posing as teenage boys and girls and using blackmail and threats to compel them to keep sending more explicit content. Together with 9 others, Mayer exploited as many as 100 girls online before one of them partnered with the FBI to fish out the criminals in 2017. In 2018, Mayer was convicted on multiple counts of sexual exploitation of minors, conspiracy, and other charges. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison in 2018. But on the 2nd of January the following year, he was murdered in jail by 3 inmates. He was locked up, beaten, and kicked him viciously. During a prolonged attack ended his life, one of his killers, Adam Wright, admitted to stomping on his head and throwing him down a flight of metal stairs. If you made it to the end, leave a like and maybe subscribe. It means a lot to me. As we know, there seems to be an unspoken rule in prison that child sex offenders should be targeted, beaten up, and even killed for what they did. Thank you for watching, and if you are interested, check out my videos for more riveting content.